Say bye to Pepper. Enjoying your Tuesday here. There are three things I wanted to cover today. The first is the release of the ghostwriters, ghostwriter tapes from Joe Biden, which took place before the 2020 election, or at least some of them, at least one that's important. So there was always, I found the initial charging, or I should say rating of Mar-a-Lago over classified documents interesting at the time, because it's clear that a message was being sent. And the only way that message would make sense is if after that message was sent, that other people, other presidents in this case, who did the same thing, would receive charges. But the interesting thing that happened after the Mar-a-Lago raid was all of a sudden Mike Pence found classified documents in one of his residences or one of the offices. Why he still had them, don't know. Then it happened with Biden. And I will say the interesting thing about Biden, and this also applies to Mike Pence, is that neither one of those individuals were president. And so it was always assumed that the highest authority on declassification was the president. The vice presidents don't have the same ability. Congressmen don't have the same ability. And definitely civilians and those within the military do not have the same ability. The Secretary of Defense or National Intelligence, they have the ability to, some do have the ability to declassify, but there is a formalized process for it. As it comes to the president, it seems it's a gray area because while on the one hand, the president has the ultimate authority on classification, there needs to be obviously a documented way to officially declassify the things that he determines are no longer classified. And so he can literally wave his arm over boxes and say, these are declassified. And from that point, they are declassified, but there needs to be a formalized process to essentially create the notification system that all the stuff that is contained within there is declassified. So people know what is classified and what's not classified, not just that a bunch of random documents and random boxes were declassified. So from that point, it's more of a process question than it is whether or not the president has the ultimate authority on declassification. Everybody, there's no argument there that the president, while sitting in office, has the ultimate authority on classification. But again, vice presidents do not, congressmen do not, senators, House of Representatives members under Congress do not have it. No one else has that ability. And so when these tapes were released, well, actually, let me go back. The reason why Joe Biden wasn't ultimately charged after having found documents in three separate locations, if I'm not mistaken. One of those locations was the garage in his Delaware home, which was accessible to literally anybody that was coming over to the house. Another one was in an office, and I think another one was in another office. But there was no question whether or not Joe Biden had the authority to have classified documents. So the only question was, will he be charged? And fast forward, Robert Hur gives his report and says effectively that Biden did all of these things that should warrant someone getting charged, but we do not recommend charges because a sympathetic jury would see him as essentially a senile old man, and they wouldn't prosecute or convict him for that because they would see him as a well-meaning old man um, suffering from what everybody was seeing, which was like the early onset dementia. Um, and so there were no charges there. Now, the interesting thing is that the tapes that are circulating, especially one excerpt in particular, in regard to Biden confirming that the documents in which he was going to uh, make available, or at least speak to his ghostwriter about, were classified, and he knew it. Joe Biden was never president at that point. This is 2017. He was a former vice president. He was a former congressman. So the question is, why does he have these documents? Number two, he knew he had them. So fast forward to when these documents were just found after the Mar-a-Lago raid on Trump. Biden, in these, at least the particular documents that he's talking about, knows that he has some classified documents, and also mentions, oh, it was something to the effect of, they're not listed as classified. They are classified, but they're not listed in classified. Like, they're missing essentially the folders that would denote classification, the same folders that were planted in front of the documents that were pulled out of boxes from Mar-a-Lago. None of those documents were in those folders. Those folders were just there as references to say, these are the folders and these are the classifications. But it wasn't that these documents were in the folders that were clearly marked classified. And so Biden acknowledged in 2017 that he had classified documents and then gave access to them to this ghostwriter who was writing this book. And so looking at the way Robert Hur talked about it, I will just say this, all of it is clearly political, right? Like the option to charge and the option to not charge and the option to turn a blind eye and all of this stuff is all political. But I will say it's particularly grinding my gears because this was the first kind of salvo that ultimately kind of, I would say, it created a situation in which it's very hard to not retaliate politically, specifically. And so up to this point, presidents had never been charged for this stuff. And you can say what you want about whether or not Trump was working with the National Archives or whether he wasn't or whatever. But the norm was that we didn't go after presidents. And essentially that cascaded out because it became very clear to most people that this is very political. It ultimately got Trump to run again, which I don't think he was necessarily going to run again in 2020. And so, or I should say 2024. Yeah, whatever, whenever it happened. But it essentially put us on a different trajectory. And so there are a lot of foreign countries that we would consider banana republics because they do very similar things. They find very political crimes I don't want to say crimes, political things to prosecute former presidents and the party apparatus and just go after them. You see this in India, you see this in South America, you see this in Central America. You're starting to see this in Europe. and this happens also in Asia. South Korean former president who declared martial law. Um, all things within his powers, but again, when one party decided to go after him, essentially that sends a cascading effect of, or cascading series of effects of, well, now we've got to, like, we can't overlook other things. We've got to do the same thing. And so that decision to go after Trump created the cascading effect of the Georgia prosecutions and the multiple New York prosecutions that happened, including the January 6th prosecution or attempted prosecution for free speech. And so it just sent us on this really bad trajectory. I will say that I think the approach that the Trump administration is taking on trying to release information to make it obvious that people have committed crimes is better than kind of twisting the system to create these unique circumstances that have never been tested in court. Going after Letitia James for mortgage fraud when it is kind of obvious to everyone that, yeah, she committed mortgage fraud. And by the way, that prosecution happened off of a Democrat from New York who was doing an investigation into politicians there and just happened to stumble across this and brought it to light. And of course, Fox News and other more right-leaning news outlets were promoting it, but this didn't come from the Trump administration. It came from an outsider, a Democrat. I would say probably a former Democrat now. That guy's getting raked over the coals. But nonetheless, it came from an outsider. They took a look at it. They investigated it and were like, okay, this actually makes sense. James Comey acknowledging that he leaked classified information to a friend to then push through the media. And he was leaking classified information, or at least information in general, from the FBI, the news agencies. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty clear that intelligence agencies and political persons leak all the time. JD Vance's team leaks on Trump. Trump's team leaks on JD Vance. The FBI, leaks either in favor or against the current administration to create narratives. Like, all of that is very true, but it's also in many cases illegal, and so it's very rarely prosecuted. But it is against the law. So going after James Comey for that stuff was great. I would say the 8647. Yeah, I mean, you got to investigate these people that are making threats against the president, obviously. But again, I just look at the Biden stuff and it's just reaffirming that the Biden administration, whether it was Biden himself or people within the administration, weaponized the government in a way that I don't think the US will recover from for a very long time. Had they not made that decision, it's possible that Trump may not have run. And it's very possible that the other charges that were pushed would have never happened. But that single decision by whoever it may have been, whether it was James Comey or whether it was somebody else, put us on a trajectory that's ultimately going to change the US. And, it's pretty obvious, Republicans aren't out all the time talking about prosecuting people, prosecuting political opponents. Fauci, I would say, is a separate case, but in general, they're not running on that. Democrats are running on that. They are out actively talking about prosecuting Trump administration officials for what? Don't know. Just, we don't like what they're doing, so we're going to go after them and, make them have to spend a ton of money on lawyers and legal fees and dry up their piggy banks, all because they decided to work with the president. guarantee they'll be going after the president after this. After this, well, if Democrats win, that is, they will be going after the president. If Democrats win the House in the fall, they will be trying to impeach for whatever they think is they don't like and whatever. They're going to go after the Trump family. Um, and they seem to be on this path. And I don't think there's an easy way off of this, because it's going to force retaliation at some point from Republicans, in the same manner that Democrats are pursuing these kind of prosecutions, these kind of high level prosecutions more specifically. And so we'll see how it all turns out. But, I think, the tapes that came out vindicate the fact that Republicans were saying this was all political and the Trump Mar-a-Lago raid was political. It was. It should have never happened. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Trump supporter. I'm saying that because I don't want to see our democracy go up in flames because a couple stupid people decide to turn us into a banana republic. I wouldn't want to see, prior to Trump getting charged, I wouldn't want to see Biden, or I wouldn't want to see Obama or George Bush Jr. Pursued in the same manner. It's not something we should do, because it sets a very bad precedent. It also removes our credibility on the world stage. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is just completely different subject: bad TV. And I think there is a concerted effort. I'm going to talk specifically to TV news, which is really just TV opinion panels masquerading as news. I'm an avid watcher of the five. I find it entertaining. I find, you get to actually see whether or not they're serious about their stances based on how much Jesse Waters is joking about a subject or taking it very seriously. The same thing, you get to see the responses to, say, Jessica Tarloff, who I would say is a good representative of Democrat mentality, liberal mentality, old school liberal mentality. I don't want to say old school, I would say new school, progressive liberal mentality. You get to see when she might be right on some things, or when she's generally wrong, and how people tend to argue from a losing position. But again, they don't say that they're news. They are clearly opinion. They make jokes. They're not trying to hide it. But when you watch like Abby Phillips on CNN, or you watch these other ones, they're masquerading as if they are telling news when they're just spitting opinions. And a lot of times opinions devoid of facts. But what I will say is particularly annoying about this style of news delivery is that it always leads to these shouting matches where usually you have like a Scott Jennings making sense, and then he's just getting shouted down by other people on the panel. And it doesn't make for good TV, as in the sense of like you're walking away from that going like, man, I just learned something really important. And it leaves you in this place where you're just like, what did I just watch? Like, this is just like arguing for like 5 minutes. Like, what is that? And particularly, I watch The Hill Rising just about every day, because I think it gives a good landscape, or good kind of like overview of like the topics of the day that are being talked about in news more broadly, where I can digest it without generally all of the side banter and the arguing. And I will say that's the case most days. But there is a particular co-host on that show, which is Lindsay, and I can't remember her last name, who can't argue to save her life. And what she does is typical of what I see on one side of my family, predominantly the black side of my family, which is the the goal isn't to win the argument. The goal isn't, or the I should say, the goal isn't to persuade anybody. It is to demean, belittle, and overtalk people. And if you ever had the experience of having family members that do that when they want to have a conversation about something, or they want to have a conversation about something, they're not looking for an actual conversation. They're just looking to feel like they've learned something, and then like oppose that opinion or viewpoint on you. Because when you have questions and you are trying to make a point, they just talk over you and just raise their voice. And so Lindsay does this all the time. Today was especially annoying. Especially there's a segment about Mamdani and the government-run grocery stores in the city. She clearly doesn't understand that the reason why those grocery stores can offer prices at 30% lower and extend out the 30 days period of locking in those prices is because it's being subsidized by taxpayer dollars. She doesn't understand it. She just thinks, oh, it's just the government uh, competing with other businesses. And Robbie's point is correct, which is, well, why did they do 30%? Why didn't they do 50%? Why didn't they do 80%? Why didn't they do 100%? Um, Again, the government can subsidize the losses and continue to offer things at a lower price, which regular businesses cannot compete with. And Lindsay can't like wrap her head around the fact that um, that's exactly the case. And so instead of acknowledging that she might not know what she's talking about, she just proceeded to raise her voice and try to overtalk Robbie while Robbie's trying to make solid points. And this happens a lot in that show. It doesn't make for great TV. And I don't know why The Hill allows that to continue, especially with that particular co-host, Lindsay. The same thing happens occasionally. Like I watch Tim Pool. There was a day where like Tim Pool was out and there's like two females that were on the show and they're just arguing with each other. Did not make for great TV. It's just like it's like you recoil. You're like, what am I even watching right now? Like I'm not getting anything out of this. I don't want to hear two people arguing. I want to hear people making good points. And I want to like see a real debate and like be able to see both sides of an argument. When two people are arguing, it's just like it's great TV, maybe for women. It's like reality TV, but it's not great TV for me as a man. It's just it's not good. And when Niall is on, I don't agree with 99.9 of what Niall is saying. I think he's pompous, generally speaking. But what he does not do is he doesn't try to overtalk and yell his opinions at somebody. He tends to wait, listen to what they have to say, and then respond. Not wait for somebody to start talking and then respond over them, not even knowing what they're saying. Again, it doesn't make for great TV. I wish The Hill would maybe have a conversation with Lindsay. It's not good. It's not good. I know Tim Pool I was reading the comments on that particular IRL episode, and people were just saying the exact same thing. They're like, dude, two women fighting on the show is like making bad TV, and you could just see the viewership drop. And the same thing for like CNN. Like, it's great to have these clips from Scott Jennings, but like you can't get sustained viewership on the actual show because people can't stand sitting through those segments. Republicans or Democrats, doesn't matter. It just doesn't make for great entertainment or fun TV. The other thing I wanted to talk about is food deserts, and this came up actually on the Hill segment. It was talking about Mamdani and putting out these grocery stores. Well, people always talk about food deserts, but they never actually like address why food deserts exist. There's really one major reason, which is the economics of opening a grocery store in said area doesn't make financial sense. And it doesn't make financial sense for two primary factors. One is you got to look at the local people that are there and the average income, and you got to look at your store and go, okay, my store operates at X profit margin. If I put a store in this region, I have to drop prices to maybe a point where the economics just do not work out, where margin cannot be obtained or a healthy margin cannot be attained because of the prices at which I'd have to sell at. That's one reason. The other reason, which is generally the bigger reason, is crime. Generally, in lower income areas, you see higher crime rates. And so places like Whole Foods and Harris Teeter and, enter in whatever grocery store you want there, like don't want to be in areas in which they're going to have high theft. This is actually the reason why you see a lot of grocery stores, not grocery stores, but drugstores like Walgreens and CVS pulling out of these areas, is because they're just getting robbed so much. Like the losses that they're taking on merchandise are outweighing the profitability of the location. So it's better for them just to close the location and no longer get any revenue from it, versus have that store robbed on a regular basis. This is the bigger reason, and there's a tension here because generally the running kind of joke is, oh, if you're in a city and like a Harris Teeter or a Trader Joe's is opening in your neighborhood, it's been gentrified. Well, that is generally true. You could see this in Harlem, like on 125th, that grocery store has moved in. Now, crime has gotten, when I was there, leading in 2024, crime had gotten pretty bad. A lot of drug zombies outside. But generally speaking, 125th on the east side, actually, and all the way across, was generally getting better. And like these grocery stores were like, all right, well, new developments coming in for higher income people, housing is going in, the income levels have got up to a point where we can afford to put a store here, and it makes sense. And so generally, an area is safe because of the stores that are deciding to invest in the area. Now, when you get in these lower income areas, if you go out to parts of, I'll say parts of the Bronx, usually like the parts of the Bronx that are closer to Queens, most of Queens in general, the outer parts of Brooklyn, not like the Williamsburg and Greenpoint and Bushwick parts, but like the further out parts, you'll start to see that grocery stores drop off. And that's because crime is high. And you can, like, if you have a Citizen app, you can see where the crime is all the time. And you're constantly getting updates. Oh, there's a shooting. Oh, there was a stabbing. Oh, there's this. And it's usually in those areas. So businesses don't want to invest. So these areas are kind of flush with bodegas, which don't have a lot of natural produce. If you look at the outside of the city and you look at more of the suburban and rural areas, what you have is not a lot of people in an area to support a store being there. So what you have are like Dollar Generals and dollar stores blanketing these areas. They're smaller footprints, they're lower cost, so they can meet kind of the economics of the area. And people go there to buy, in some cases, produce and other stuff. But generally speaking, like they don't have the best things there: high fat, high calories, low fiber, low protein, and so they tend not to be as healthy of foods. And so you see these food deserts pop up. And I say all of that to say that Mamdani's grocery stores are going to de facto, if they maintain throughout if he gets reelected especially, it's going to create food deserts, because what's going to happen is the grocery stores, even the bodegas that are in the area, can't compete with the government prices. And people are going to be driven to go after price versus going after these other stores, because that's just how people work. That's the psychology of the entire situation. And so what you'll see just a growing number as Mamdani's grocery stores roll into these areas. You'll see food deserts start to form. Local bodegas won't be able to compete with the prices that are offered from government subsidized stores. And so people work on economic factors. Like if I was in the city and the government grocery store that was a couple blocks away or around the corner from my house had some of the things I was looking for at significantly discounted prices, obviously I'm going to shop there. That's not helping the people, especially the lower income individuals that are there, because those stores are just going to sell out of goods quickly, and they're going to continuously sell out as they restock the shelves. And the local businesses that would have sold those similar products aren't going to be able to compete with the prices. People won't go there, so you'll see bodegas that are still around in certain areas start to disappear. Grocery stores, like especially, grocery store, like some of the grocery stores there aren't very big. I would say that was the case on my area, 96 and Park Avenue on the Upper East Side. Smaller grocery stores, smaller footprints, they won't be able to compete with the lower prices. And so they're going to see reduced revenue, which means that they're going to see lower margins from the store and lower profitability, which means that they will have to eventually close up those stores. And in certain areas, the only option will be the government-run grocery stores. And I think you can ultimately picture what it's going to look like with people lining up for the store to open so that they can get in and get goods from the only grocery store that's around before they sell out and it has to be restocked the next day. That is effectively bread lines. You can say milk lines. You can say food lines in general. And that's what's going to end up happening. Again, New York is on a very bad path right now. I'm reminded every day as to how lucky I am to have gotten out when I did. But it's very unfortunate. But food deserts exist for a reason. In New York City, it's economics driven. Everywhere it's economics driven. In New York City, more specifically, it's a combination of economics and crime. I'll say anybody who's been to New York City and gone to a Duane Reade, or I say a Walgreens or a CVS, and everything you want to buy is behind a plastic shield that has to be unlocked by an employee there. You got to hit the button. So all you're hearing there are the calls to unlock things. One, that's just driving more people to buy things online from Amazon, while simultaneously these same people complain about Amazon working conditions and whatever. But it's making it more difficult to just go around the store, go around the corner and buy the things you want. And two, it's making the stores less profitable. And so at any rate, those are the things I want to talk about today. I was just like, I'm kind of like, the classified document stuff is just annoying because Democrats will still say, oh, Trump sold classified documents and he shouldn't have had them. It's like, well, he was president. Completely different. It's not apples to apples. Completely different than a vice president or a former congressman holding classified documents when they never should have had them in the first place. They had no legal ability to hold them outside of a SCIF in the first place. The president can walk in and out of the SCIF with classified documents. Doesn't matter. He's the president. And can he hold them after he leaves office? If he's waved the magic wand and said they're all unclassified, sure. Again, it's got to be documented, but sure. It's kind of ridiculous. And then, watching The Hill talk about Mamdani and Lindsay making up bad arguments and yelling over Robbie, like these are things that kind of catch my attention. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. And as always, keep believing that the best is still ahead for America. Peace out.